everybody, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another Contrast Plus painting tutorial, but this one's a little bit different because today we're also covering how to paint miniatures in the right order. I know that seems like a slightly strange technique to talk about, but we have an absolute perfect candidate here. We have a Kataphron Breacher, and this is one of those ones where they are very simple in terms of their color scheme. They are red, if they're Martian, red, silver, gold, bit of black, and a bit of flesh. But getting it done in a way that is easy, especially when you've fully constructed it like I have, and getting it done in a sort of timely fashion can be one of those questions that I think I often get asked about, kind of just how is it you come up with the scheme in order. And that is what we're going to be covering at the same time today. So this is how to paint Kataphron Breachers, of course, but it's also about kind of ordering the painting of your miniature. So with that in mind, we've primed the whole thing in grey Seer, and as mentioned, this is built in a single assembly. Now, one of the things you could do is you could build this in sub-assemblies. However, not everybody does that immediately off the rip. And if this is your first time doing a miniature and you don't really expect it to be as complicated or not as complicated as you think it might be, then it might be something that you run into. And this is going to give you a little bit of a technique on how it is we do that. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're actually going to separate this miniature into two different sections for the ease of painting. We're going to have the actual servitor on the top here, and we've got the bottom part of the miniature down here. Now, as you know, normally around here on Contrast Plus, what we do is we start with the contrast paint. However, with this one, we're going to start with the metallic, but we're not going to do all of this color at once to make painting the stages of this miniature a lot easier. So the color we are using first is some thinned down Iron Warriors. I'm going to be applying this over the top of the tracks and the wheels. And this is because when we're painting with the contrast paint, because it's see-through or translucent, if we get mistakes or we make errors in the painting on top of the contrast paint, it can be a little bit more complicated to try and fix it. So we've got a slightly complicated, difficult to reach detail under here in the form of the wheels. So we want to do this first. However, we then have other details that are also going to be silver in the actual body of the breacher that are easier to get to, but the red around it is more complicated. So for example, these little pipes right in there. So we're not going to be doing those. We are just going to get this over the top of the entirety of the tracks and the wheels, like this. And if we do make any mistakes by getting this on top of the kind of shell armor around here, we can just go in with a little bit of grey Seer and correct it. And because these are slightly more difficult areas to reach, one technique we have for being able to handle these is to thin our paint down just a tiny little bit more than we would normally, and then we can place our brush in there carefully and then just kind of wiggle the brush around a little bit to distribute the paint. And because it's a little bit more watery, a little bit more smoother to apply, you'll get it over the detail. You can just trust the brush to do the work rather than having to trust in your brush stroke to do the work. So for example, right under here, I'm just going to trust my brush to get this paint where it needs to get to. By moving that slightly thinner paint around, using little movements with the brush itself. As you can see, we've got it. There we go. We've got a slightly easier bit here, but then we've got more on the back here, and you can see if you're painting along, but you can see that the Iron Warriors has got there just by simply trusting the brush, using those little movements with the brush to distribute the paint. We just go back the other way to make sure that we get the angle that we didn't get before. Because when that paint's a little thinner, it'll just flow into the areas. Because the bit that often gets missed is recesses, like recess detail. For example, see just there, I've missed a little bit. So what you want is the paint to flow a little bit more than it would normally, so it flows into those areas. So with all of that Iron Warriors applied to both tracks and both sets of wheels, as you can see, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Baal Red. Now the reason we're using Baal Red is because it's a one coat contrast paint solution and it doesn't stain. It's just a kind of single pigment deal. And whilst the Kataphron Breachers are a slightly darker red than the rest of the AdMech range, the instinct would be to go for something like Flesh Tearer's Red because it's a lot darker. However, because of the large surface areas and because we don't want to make any kind of horrible mistakes as we go, Baal Red's perfect because we can shade it down to where we need to get to, and it's much easier to work with when it comes to working on such large areas. So we're going to be applying the Baal Red over the top of, well, pretty much all of the skirt armour, the track armour, just like this. And we're then going to start moving into the main body of the Kataphron Breacher itself. And this is where we can, as mentioned, be a little bit messy. We don't have to worry about not covering over any of the metallic details, because they will be metallic paints first and foremost. And because we're not going to be doing the servitor yet, for the sake of ease, if we get some Baal Red on it, it doesn't matter, because it's just as previously mentioned, single pigment. You can see I've just gotten a little bit on that track just there. That's okay. We can fix that by just going back over it with some Iron Warriors. But what's harder to do is to fix Iron Warriors accidentally going over the top of Baal Red. So with all of that Baal Red all applied, and it's all now fully dry as well, we're going to shade it, because whilst we could leave that until later, we do want this to be that slightly darker red that we've already talked about, and in the interests of if we make any mistakes on the silver, we need to get the shading on there now. So the colour we're going to be using is Carroburg Crimson. I'm going to be applying this over the top of all of the red. Just like that sort of thing. And we need to get this over the top of all of the red. Again, this is all just in the interests of making things easier for ourselves in the event of having to make any corrections. So as I've already said, if you're going to cover it over with something like a metallic, then it's absolutely fine. And correcting a metallic is also very easy to do. However, correcting contrast paints is not so easy to do. Usually involves mixing and glazing, or worst case scenario, fully recovering and going again, which on large pieces of armor like this is generally not preferential. And at the moment we've got one contrast colour next to a non-contrast colour, which makes it a really good opportunity to get the shading in there. So we can get the tone that we're after. So with that Carroburg Crimson all applied, it is still drying at the moment, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is move on to another colour, and we're going to move on to the black. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take some Black Legion here, and on our lower part of our Kataphron Breacher, we're going to start picking out all the black details. So we're starting off with the cogs, where we're going to paint in the right hand side of the cog with the black, and the left hand side of each of the skulls. Like that. You also just want to catch the inside track. Just like I've done there. Then on the skull, we just draw a line going down the middle basically. To give us that kind of thing. Then what we're also going to do is start picking out areas like these cables in here. like that sort of thing. And again, when it comes to this side, as you can see in there, you just want to trust the brush by just moving it into that area and using those little movements just to shift that paint around, like we've done there. Now what we're also going to do at this point is we're now going to, on our servitor on the top, I'm not going to paint all of the black details on here yet because again, order of operations is important. But what we are going to do is we're going to pick out all of the interiors just like this sort of thing. And again, we trust our brush. So rather than like with the silver where we thin it down a little bit more, because we've got contrast paint, it takes to this kind of thing really well because it's already very, very thin. We're just going to get this all over like this. And as said, there is more black details to do later on. I'm not going to do them now for the sake of our sanity. So with that now done, what we can do is we can take some skeleton horde and we can apply this over the top of this kind of part of the undercarriage. You want to make sure you work it right in there so as not to miss a beat. And with that skeleton horde applied, we're then going to take some thinned down Retributor Armour. I'm going to apply this over the top of the trim on our armour bits. And we're also going to apply this over the top of any of these kind of dome-like objects. So with that now done, what we can do is we can take some thinned down Iron Warriors once again. And we can use this to, one, do some corrections. So for example, a little bit of red just there and there as well, like that. But what we can also do is use this to now paint in all of the remaining details on the track mount. Like that sort of thing. And we can use this to pick out any areas that are currently red that we want to be silver instead. So for example, these little pipey rivety type things. Just there, like so. So with that done, all of the base coats are now on the bottom half, and some of the shading is done, but we're not going to continue with the shading because again, this is an order of operations type thing. What we're instead going to do is we're now going to go on to the servitor himself, and we're going to be using Baal Red next. We're going to be using this to colour in all of the red details, of which there is many. Now, because, as I've already mentioned, we did Baal Red over the top of well, we used Baal Red for the red. We may have a couple of little splodges and things on the servitor itself as well. That's okay, because Baal Red will cover over it nicely, whereas if we'd used Flesh Tearers Red or Blood Angels Red, we would have to recover those because it would absolutely show through and it would look scratchy. And, well, we don't want that. So I'm going to use this now to paint in all of the red of the servitor, because all of the silver details kind of now sit on top rather than inside or around the red. So we can do this, and because we've already done the black, we don't have to worry about getting black on there. As you do more and more models like this, you get more and more experienced at identifying the order of operations when it comes to painting. And it might seem a little disjointed to do a bit of red and then do a bunch of other colors and then do a little bit more red and so on and so forth, but if you don't like sub-assembly, like I don't, it's truly a worthwhile skill to nurture. So with all that Baal Red now applied, we're then going to take Carroburg Crimson once again. I'm going to use this to shade all of the red. Just like we did before. So with that now done, we can pick out a pile of details using some thinned down Iron Warriors. So we're going to go for some of these pipes and cables, the large canister on the shoulders, nuts and bolts and various things. There's a lot of silver to apply here, as is good and proper for the Adeptus Mechanicus. So with all that Iron Warriors applied, we're then going to take some Black Legion now. I'm going to use this to pick out all of our remaining black details. So that's going to include any of the cables that we haven't done with silver. Such as this one here. It's going to include some of the casing on the weapon. as well as any of our Mechanicus symbols. Finish off in the same style as the ones on the tracks. So with that Black Legion all applied, all the way around, we're then going to take some Poxwalker. I'm going to apply this over the top of the face. And so with that done, we're now going to take some thinned down Retributor Armour once again. I'm going to use this to paint in all of the remaining details. And as you can see how this has come together, whilst there is a fair bit of going back and forth, as I already mentioned, it's not a particularly complex scheme, but the art is in getting to this stage in a way that requires very little going back and forth. Making constant corrections. So with that all done, we've got all of our base coats on and it's looking pretty cool. However, we do now need to add some shades, and this is where the magic kind of really comes to the forefront with this type of model. Because we've done things the way we have done them, but our shades are minimal because we've already done some as we've gone along, we actually are only going to apply 2. Now one of them is Nuln Oil, and we're going to be applying this over the top of all of the silver, all of the black, and all of the red as well. Just like this, because as I previously mentioned, the red is that little bit darker than everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this all over. We're going to get this over any white details that we have on those skulls, but some of them have got red all over them. But don't worry, we are going to fix those once we've got our shades on. What we are going to try and do is avoid any of the gold and the bone, but ultimately, even if we get some of this on the gold, it's not the end of the world. It just adds another kind of little interesting bit of shading. So with that Nuln Oil applied pretty much over the entirety of the model, we've now got the perfect red and we've got some wonderful shaded silver and black. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our second and final shade, which is going to be some Guilliman Flesh, which is a little bit stronger than we would perhaps normally do, but it really just makes these small amounts of gold really pop. We come to add our highlights very shortly. So with that done, our Kataphron Breacher is now pretty much what I would call a Warhipster battle ready. And it's looking pretty fabulous. However, we are going to take it to the next level. I'm going to do this by adding one layer and some highlights. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with some thinned down Corax White. And this is the layer. And we're going to be using this to essentially fix all of our white details. So we've got the white areas of the cogs, which in this case, this one's very red. So we just need to layer this over the top. Just like this. It's got a little bit of an overspill just in there. Just going to wash the brush and go in there with a clean brush. And just lift it out like that. We are of course going to relayer the skull as well. Just like that sort of thing. And the other thing we're going to do with the Corax White is we're going to apply this in between the grooves of our plasma. So with that Corax White all applied, it's now technically at the Warhipster battle ready, and it looks fantastic. But we're going to continue on, and we're going to take some thinned down Evil Sunz Scarlet. I'm going to use this to highlight all of our red, all the way around. So with all that Evil Sunz Scarlet applied to all of the red details, we're then going to take some thinned down Deepkin Flesh. I'm going to use this to highlight the skin and the eyeball. Just like that. So with that then done, we take some Frostheart. I'm going to apply this in the plasma coils. So with that now done, we're going to take some thinned down Dawnstone, and we're going to use this to highlight all of our black details. So with all of that black highlighted, we're then going to take some thinned down Ironbreaker. I'm going to use this to highlight all the silver. Now you don't have to do all of the silver. You can in fact just not do the tracks at all if you want them to be a little bit darker. However, what I would like to do here is just pick out the kind of outside bit, leave the wheels. They look nice and dark and kind of oily. And then just pick out kind of the large bits of the tread. So do that line all the way around, and then large bits of the tread. And finally, we're going to finish it off by highlighting all of the gold using some thinned down Liberator Gold.
So here we have it, our finished Kataphron Breachers, and whilst they may look complicated and difficult to do, if you follow the kind of exact steps as I've done them here, you should get them done in absolutely no time. I've just done 6 in the last sort of 3 days, which was quite challenging, but really fun, and I think they look fantastic. I really think I've nailed that red there. Oh, lovely. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me a little bit further, you absolutely can do. Head over to patreon.com/Warhipster, just like all of these wonderful, amazing people have done. And you can also become a YouTube channel member, just like this incredible bunch of folks scrolling up on the screen before you. There's a hell of a lot of you, and well, I can't do this without you. YouTube and Patreon, you guys absolutely keep the lights on and make all of this worth it. Thank you so much to all of you for everything you do. And if you really like this video and you just want to shoot me a little thanks, you can click on the thanks button just below this video. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.